Aloha everyone, welcome. Thanks for being here in person and online. So I'm going to start class with an amazing set of facts. Each of your feet is comprised of 26 bones, 30 joints, and over 100 tendons, ligaments, and muscles. I want to give you a moment for all those numbers to sink in. What this tells me, and what I've experienced in my own body, the feet are so adaptable. You know, even if your toes cross or you have some kind of pain somewhere, your feet can adapt and change and evolve pretty quickly. And so today we'll be exploring activating the muscles in the feet and the deep core all the way down to the arches of the feet to see what happens in each of your beautiful feet. So with that, please spread out your blanket if you want to. I love practicing on a blanket. It helps the releasing of the doership. We will need a couple of blankets, a couple of blocks, and a strap. You'll have time later to grab the strap and an additional blanket for a restorative pose at the end if you don't have it already. And with that, please turn to your right and make your way down. Actually, before you make your way down, it will be most handy if your two blocks are near your feet off to one side, so they'll be there when you roll up, and that's all you need for now. We'll start in silence, and then if you're playing the playlist, I'll tell you when to hit play on the first track. So take your time making your way down and allow the arms to rest on the blanket and take a couple of moments to gently snow angel the arms, maybe not all the way up overhead, but just to take in the texture of the blanket and let yourself start connecting with your environment. And then reach the hands towards the heels. If you haven't already, bend the knees, place the soles of the feet to the earth, and walk the feet wider than the hips. Knock the knees in. If it feels comfortable, close the eyes and start tuning into the breath. If it feels hard to close the eyes, if it feels hard to feel the breath, just take note of that without any judgment. If it start to become aware of your reaction to being still in this moment. Is your body like, I've waited all day to lay down? Or does it feel challenging? And again, no judgment, but just a noticing, an observation. And then see if connecting to the breath flow can help you become more and more present. Without any tension, try slowing the breath down. And that slowing comes from relaxing more deeply. Try closing the mouth and gently letting the tongue press into the roof of the mouth. That might even lengthen the neck slightly. And we'll just take a few more breaths like this to arrive in our body, arrive in the present moment, and sync with the prana coming in and flowing through us via the breath. As you breathe and become still, you may notice areas that feel tense or rigid. For me, I just noticed that in my neck and shoulders. It might be different for you. Congratulations if you don't notice any of that. If you do notice something, give yourself permission to wiggle a little bit and adjust where your arms are, where your feet are, where your head and neck let yourself soothe and balance. And we'll start to wake up the deep core. If you're following along with the musical playlist, you can hit play on the first track and make sure it is set to loop. I'll tell you when to go to the second track. So each individual track will loop. So walk the feet in a little so they're in line with the hips instead of wider. I know you can't see them, but try pointing them forward, and it's okay if they're not exactly forward. Just bring that awareness to the angle of the toes. Bring the fingertips to the front of the hips and start to rock the pelvis forward and back. And let this be really small and gentle. See if you can keep feeling the breath as the pelvis tilts. And notice how when the pelvis rocks forward, the low back arch increases. And as the pelvis tilts back, the low back almost flattens towards the mat. And see if you can visualize the vertebra in space, changing slightly. And then as this movement continues, try to feel the feet as well. And notice if just shining the light of your awareness all the way down to the feet changes anything in the way they're interacting with the earth, maybe even the way the legs are supporting. The next time the pelvis rocks back, pause there and notice any sense of activity in the deep core, specifically the muscles just underneath the fingertips. It's not a clenching, but just almost like a brightness that happens. And bring your awareness to the bottom rib, so the very last rib that touches down into the mat. Take a couple more pelvic tilts and notice how the bottom rib lifts as the pelvis tilts away, and then the bottom rib comes towards the earth as the pelvis tilts back. The next time again that the pelvis tilts back and the low back flattens, try to feel that bottom rib gently pressing into the mat. And imagine the musculature in the front of the spine helping push the spine and the rib cage down into the blanket. You can even wiggle your hips a little from side to side and see if you can maintain that gentle pressure between the bottom rib as the pelvis wiggles. And then come to center, and whatever amount of exertion you're using, see if you can lessen it without losing contact between bottom rib and the earth. Keeping that contact, start to inhale and notice how, with the core slightly engaged as it naturally is here, the inhale comes in slower and you might feel a sense of pressure building between the belly expanding and the musculature that contains the belly pushing back in. And then exhale naturally. Can let the body relax and take a couple of breaths like that, just allowing these deeper layers of the core to awaken. You can even slide the fingertips up to the soft tissue above the pelvis so that you can feel what's happening with the breath and the deep core. And then keeping this alignment of the pelvis and the rib cage and keeping your breath smooth, hover the shins so they're parallel to the earth. Notice if there's a tendency for you to arch the back here, and take a moment for that pelvic tilt and the pressing of the bottom rib, and notice how that instantly engages the core but without doership, right? It's not a crunch, there's no clenching. Use your next inhale, that pressurized system we just practiced, to gently tap the right toes down, and then exhale to lift them back up. Try inhaling the left toes down and move really slowly at your own pace. And if it feels really easy, Maybe you just have the most intelligent deep core ever. I hope that's the case. Often, it means there might be a little bit more stability that you could be providing by pushing the rib cage and the pelvis down into the earth. There should be a sense of warmth and heat building even in a very strong functional core. Keeping the fingers on the pelvis will help you notice if there's movement. We really don't want movement in the pelvis here in this exploration. If this feels easy, you can up the ante by pointing the toes further forward. So the further the foot reaches, the more it's going to want to be pulling the pelvis out of alignment, and the core is going to have to engage more to prevent that. Roseanne, try slowing down, like you could pause at any moment in the toe tap and feel that support. Yes, that looks great. The next time both feet are up, pause for one moment. Bring the fingertips behind the ears just to let the pecs open so you get the chest spacious, and then lower both feet down in a bridge setup. Take one relaxed breath here. Notice any warmth that has built in the core. Reach the fingertips towards the heels and evenly press into both feet. Start to reach the knees forward to let the pelvis and then one vertebra at a time lift away from the earth, and then release back down. And from that work that we were just doing of pushing the bottom rib, you might have a lot of extra sensitivity along the vertebra right now. So see if you can feel the articulation of each vertebra at a time, lifting and then releasing. Try moving really slowly with control. The next time the hips are up, pause. Bring some awareness to the knees. Make sure they feel comfortable here. Feel free to walk the shoulder blades down the back a little bit and lengthen through the back of the neck by tucking the chin. Explore gently starting to lift the right heel away from the mat and then lower it back down. Take a few on the same side, and this is activating the deep core of the leg, the soleus muscle that connects all the way up to the pelvic floor. So as you lift only through that right heel, notice if you feel a brightness into the inner thigh, into the pelvic diaphragm. Make sure you're breathing. The next time the right heel lifts, pause for one moment. Notice the sensation in the arches of the right foot. Notice any warmth building through the back of the right leg. And then set the right heel down and gently drape the spine down. Let both feet hover and kick them out towards the sky. And then we'll do that on the second side. And actually my body's craving a big stretch first. So if your body wants that, I invite you to reach arms overhead and reach through the feet. And there's a tendency here for the back to overarch. So see if you can play with that tipping of the pelvis and the pressing of the bottom rib. And we're not trying to flatten the low back out, but rather support the natural curves of the spine. Take one breath in this X shape. And then drag the heels in, reach fingertips towards the heels, pause for one moment, let yourself relax. If you want to knock knees in, you can. And then point the knees up and reach fingertips towards the heels. Start to reach the knees forward. Notice how that unweights the pelvis and allows you to intelligently lift one vertebra at a time with control. From the top of your bridge pose, shift the weight or the focus into the left foot, but I suppose you could shift the weight too. And slowly start to lift the left heel and then lower it. And less is more at first. Try to move really slowly and smoothly, even if it's just 1 inch of lift. And then as you repeat this pulse, try to feel how the lifting of the heel translates up into the calf and the sensations in the back of the left thigh, and maybe even all the way into the pelvic floor or all the way up into the diaphragm as you're breathing. The next time the heel lifts, pause there, make sure you're breathing. If this is too much, relax at any time. And then release the heel down. Feel how spacious that foot becomes after that work. And then release one vertebra at a time down. As the pelvis lands, allow the legs to unfurl towards the sky. Flex the feet this time. And notice any sensations of opening through the calves. If you want, you can take another little shake of the legs. And then set the left foot down. Keep the right foot up and bend the right knee any amount so that it's comfortable to start massaging the right calf. And you can slide the hands along the shin. You can squeeze the big meaty muscles of the gastrocnemius. And then I want you guys to actually feel the soleus because it's pretty cool. So find the fleshiest part of your calf, and the surface muscle that you're feeling is gastrocnemius, and the soleus is underneath it. So bring your fingers to touch at the center of the calf and push in just a little bit, almost like you're trying to dig underneath where the two gastrocs split. Now slowly start to push out through the ball of the right foot so that the right heel starts to draw down, and you might feel just like a little stimulation in the deep part of the calf. That is the soleus muscle. Do you guys feel that? And cool. Thanks for the thumbs up, Annapurna. And close the eyes and take a couple of these articulations of the right heel. Just notice that sense of brightening because it's a little harder to feel when you're standing, but maybe if you get familiar with it here. And then actually look at your cute little toes and try to spread them out as much as is comfortable. You can keep with the soleus activation if that feels good. You can also start to massage across the hamstrings a little bit. And then just for fun, bend the right knee, wrap the hands around the right shin, and slowly press into the left foot to lift into a single-legged bridge, which is often surprisingly challenging, so be compassionate for yourself here. And then lower the spine back down, and let's swap sides. So right foot down, left foot flies. Start by just flexing the left foot, letting the toes spread. And then bend the left knee, start to squeeze the calf, say hello to the shin, do anything that feels good, but the most important part is actually feeling. So it doesn't really matter what you're doing with your hands. Try to imagine you've got like a million, sensors in that left leg, and you're picking up on all the different pressure, all the different stimulation from the hands. And then let the fingertips meet behind the calf at that center point of the gastrocs, and let the fingers dig in just a little bit deeper, and then start to point out through the ball of the left foot, so that flointing position where you're flexing and pointing, and allow the left heel to draw down towards the calf, and notice that little sense of brightening that's deeper. And take a few moments to explore that. Maybe you can even start to feel what happens beyond the soleus, so further up the leg. Maybe you can even feel how that relates to the core. You might feel like a little brightening in the muscles that we were feeling with our toe tap exercise earlier. And then spread the toes out. Give yourself some last little massages, especially down towards the hamstrings. Hug the left knee into the chest and take one moment to explore your single leg bridge on the other side. And often it's easier on one side than the other, so it's okay if you notice that. It's a great thing to Realize that your glutes are stronger on one side. That's pretty common. Grab behind both legs and take as many rocks and rolls as you want to come up to seated. Oh, you guys are rockers. Keep going. That's wonderful. Once you're up at seated, having blocks nearby will be handy. If you'd like to grab a sip of water, you're welcome to. And I invite you to go to the next track if you're on the musical adventure with us. Okay. Anchor your left foot down and lean over to the right, planting your right palm so you've got a little more space between your right arm and your left leg. Start to push into the right palm and slide the right knee behind you so that you can place your hands towards the left foot. Cool. Grab your blocks, place them to the inside of your left foot, which might mean that you'd like to walk your foot over to the left just a little bit. If you've got a sensitive knee, or if you just want to love on yourself a little bit, I invite you to place a blanket underneath your right knee. Let's take a moment to slide the right knee back and make some gentle circles with the pelvis, moving really nice and slow. Start to notice how the circling of the pelvis shifts where the weight is in the left foot, and challenge yourself to keep the left big toe anchored down as you circle your hips here. Notice how keeping the big toe down as the hip circles starts to activate the arch of the foot. And then bring equal weight into front and back leg. Anchor the big toe down and see if you can lift all 4 of your toes. Be really patient and compassionate with yourself here, but explore lifting the toes. And then try putting the toes down and lifting just the big toe. And play with this a couple of times. If it's frustrating and you need a break, just lift the heel to activate the soleus as we were exploring on our back a little bit, and then try again. And a physical therapist told me that we all, or almost all of us, have the muscular strength to do this. It's just a neurological limitation. So if you're having trouble, it's just because that pathway's not there yet. And the more you explore it, the more awareness you shine, the sooner the body will figure it out. Take one more moment. And then again, press equal weight into both feet. And as you push the legs down into the earth, let the spine slowly unweight and float up. Reach arms overhead. Walk the left foot back just a little bit so you've got a shorter stance. And play with very slowly levitating the left heel for a soleus lift. Notice as the heel lifts, if the body wants to lengthen a little bit more, if you get a little more expansion through the spine, and then release the heel down and gently return the hands to the blocks and kick into the front heel, sway the hips a little bit. Bend into the front knee and do that a couple of times. We'll add on an arm movement in just one moment. Okay, the next time the knee bends, lift the left hand and start to circle it forward and up as you extend the left leg. Yeah, and try that a couple of times. The hand swoops down and forward as the knee bends, and then up and back as the leg extends. And if we're all on the same side, you should be spiraling towards me, so it's the left leg forward and the left arm circling. But as long as what you're doing feels good, then you're doing it right. Oh, awesome, Linnea. I think that will make it easier to follow along. Let's do one more circle. And then pause the next time the arm is lifted. Shift a little extra weight into the right knee. Glide the left leg back. Pause for a moment. It is a little wobbly here when you're higher up on the block, so let the wobbles help your core awaken. And then release the hands down. Flatten the blocks to the lowest level. Tuck both toes underneath. Lift the right knee and gently push into the hands to lift the hips into a staggered down dog. Option to sway the hips if that feels good. And then set the right knee down, set the left knee down, flatten the tops of the feet, and press the hips back to the heels. Option to keep the hands on the block for a nice shoulder stretch. Take a couple of breaths here. Let the low back relax. Let your awareness float all the way down to the feet. And then float up to tabletop and step your right foot forward this time. Lift the blocks so they're at the highest height or whatever is most comfortable for you. And then start to play with circling the hips nice and slow, kind of like a hula hooping action. Anchor the right big toe this time and notice how keeping the right big toe down as the hips move starts to stimulate the awakening of different muscles in the right foot. Make sure the right knee feels safe, and of course you can always pad that left knee. And then start to press evenly into front foot and back knee, and we'll slowly rise up into our lunge. And then release back down, kick into the front heel, lengthening the front leg. And then bend the front knee, keep the hands on the blocks, anchor the big toe, and see if you can lift the 4 other toes. And then swap, so the 4 toes are down and the big toe is lifting. And try to have fun with this. Don't take it too seriously. See if you can even smile. Laugh at yourself if it's hard. Congratulations, finding a project for your body is fun. And you will get better at this if you play with it. And then let the foot be natural, but keep the big toe down because that's really helpful. And play with lifting the right heel and move extra slowly with the lifting and the lowering of the heel. Don't worry about height. Instead, try to feel the smoothness of your motion and see if you can actually feel that deep calf muscle pulling on the calcaneus, the heel bone, to lift it up. Notice if you feel any sense of brightness into the deep core. Make sure you're breathing. And then anchor the foot down, press down into the foot and the knee to slowly lift into your lunge. And then lift the right heel and notice if that changes anything through the spine. Release the hands down. Release the heel down, gently kick into the right leg and take a couple of pulses here. You might find that the left knee wants to scoot back and wide, so make sure you have enough space here. It doesn't matter how straight the right leg gets, you just want this to feel fluid, so be really kind to yourself. The next time the right knee bends, we'll be adding the arm circles, but you'll be circling away from me. So the right arm reaches forward and up, and then start to kick into the right leg as the arm circles back. Bend the knee, let the arm come down and forward, and then kick as the arm circles up and back. Take a few of these circles at your own pace. Feel free to pause anywhere that feels interesting in the body. And the next time the arm's up, pause there, shift a little extra weight into the left hand and left knee, glide the right foot back, and then anchor the right toes behind you, taking one moment to open up, embrace the wobbles. It's okay as long as nothing's feeling tight or rigid. And then release the right hand down, flatten the blocks, tuck the toes underneath and take your staggered down dog on the other side. Hold steady or sway, depending on what the body's craving. Make sure you're breathing. And then lower the right knee, bring the bring the right knee up to meet the left, and then keep the toes tucked under this time as you press the hips back into Bhaktasana, melting the forehead with a little foot stretch as the toes are tucked. And this might be enough of a foot stretch for you. If you want a little bit more, you can come onto the hands and push into the hands a little bit to send the hips closer to the heels. And you never want it to feel intense, right? We're always working with the body, gently coaxing it to adapt, but never forcing anything. A little sway from side to side can be pretty nice. And then as long as you're low to the ground, we're coming up to standing in a moment, but it'll be handy to roll up one of your extra blankets. Depending on how thick your blanket is, you might need to roll up the whole thing. We have traditional yoga blankets, and they're pretty thick, so I only need to roll up about half of it to have about like 2.5 inches that we'll be exploring a little bit later. And you can set your blocks up to the highest height and place them over to the side of that rolled blanket. And then return to your tabletop. Hover your knees and slowly walk the hands back to the feet. Let the hips lift. Let the body drape onto the thighs. Heavy head, deep bend in the knees. Let the posterior chain relax. And start to shift the weight forward and back, but keep the big toes anchored. And notice how when the weight shifts back, there's a little brightening that happens in the soleus. You might also feel it all the way up into the glutes or even the erectors. And the next time the weight rocks back, pause there. Take a breath through the back line of the body. And then bend the knees more deeply, bringing the sits bones down towards the knees. The pelvis will rock back just a little bit like we practice. As long as you don't have arthritis or any pain, you can slowly roll up one vertebra at a time. If that's not comfortable or you have arthritis, then you can come up with a flat back, keeping a lot of space in between each vertebra. And take a moment to land in standing. Close the eyes if that feels comfortable, and just notice the sensations in the feet and the ankles and the calves after all the work we've done. Shift the weight from foot to foot so you can bring the feet underneath the hips. Relax the arms, but reach through the arms so there's an activation in the upper body. And slowly start to shift the weight into the balls of the feet so the heels start to levitate, and then set the heels back down. And do this a couple of times, and notice if there's a tendency for the ankles to drop in or for them to drop out. And there's no judgment here, of course. Try to only lift the heel as high as you can while maintaining balance so they don't drop in or out. Less is more. And then whatever that height is for you, we'll take our runway walk to the front of the mat on our invisible high heels. And once you've arrived, if it's comfortable, pause on your invisible high heels and take a couple of breaths. And it's kind of fun here when you're on the ball of the foot, the muscles are active and you can actually spread the toes out wider. So notice if you can get a little extra space between your toes while you're balancing there. And then very slowly set the heels down. Start to sweep the arms forward and let the hips reach back into chair pose. And then come back up to your tiptoes and sweep the arms back. Notice the back line of the body shortening, and allow the front of the body to open. And then heels down, hips back, chair pose. Start to pulse between those two shapes nice and slow. And bring your awareness down into the heels and start to notice that sensation when the heels lift and the deep core fires. This naturally happens with each step we take. That's why it's so important that the deep core is connected to the arches of the feet. See if you can feel that pathway. The next time you're in chair pose, shift the weight over into the right foot, hover the left knee, and then push down into the right foot to come into single leg Tadasana. See how much you can relax here, balancing on the right foot. Wobbles are just fine. And then sometimes your hip flexor might get tired here. Try lifting through the left heel to engage the deep core, and notice if the hip flexor can release when you do that. And then let's switch sides, coming through chair pose, and then shift the weight into the left foot. As you're ready, hover the right foot and then power down into the left foot. Single leg Tadasana, other side. Breathe, relax, and then try that same experiment of lifting through the right heel, and notice if that can unload the hip flexors. Take a couple more breaths. Set the foot down at any time. Okay, so let's pause in Tadasana for one moment. Relax. Let your awareness flood the body, including all the way down to the soles of the feet. And then there shouldn't be any pain with this next experiment, so you might need to change the roll of your blanket, but bring the balls of the feet up onto the blanket. So this is putting your ankles in dorsiflexion, and a lot of us have limited dorsiflexion of the ankles. So if this feels really tight and intense, you can change how high the roll is. And then make sure the toes are pointed forward. Draw a line through the second toe, and they should be parallel with one another. And then see if you can stand up straight here in this dorsiflexion. You can always reach the arms out to T if it's hard to balance. And then start to play with leaning forward without bending any of the joints, just leaning some weight into the balls of the feet, and you should feel those muscles engage. It's almost like a little bit of a squeezing, and then lean back. And take a few of these pulses on your own and get really curious about what's happening in the feet as you lean forward. Try to feel the muscles in the ball of the foot awakening and supporting you. See if you can spread the toes like we were practicing before. Try to bring equal weight into both feet, and just make sure that your knees aren't hyperextending here and that the knees feel totally safe and comfortable. If it's comfortable, the next time you lean forward, you can sweep the arms back as a counterbalance and take a couple of breaths in this increased dorsiflexion of the ankle. It's kind of like what our legs are doing in Virabhadrasana 1. The back leg back is in a very similar position. And then step off your blanket, coming into neutral, and just be and acknowledge and observe. And actually, just for fun, go for a little walk around your space. You don't have to do anything different, but just explore what that did for your feet. Notice any sense of warmth in the feet. The name of this class, my feet were feeling so squishy while I was doing this. It just felt like there was a lot more blood flow and sensitivity and adaptability. So maybe there's a squishiness in your feet. And as long as we're walking around and you have this extra awareness also of the heel and the soleus pulling up on the heel, just observe that As you walk around, you might notice how the heel lifting connects all the way up into the deep core of your body. And you can walk back to the mat, and this time step on the blanket with the heels, so the balls of the feet are in front of the roll. The balls of my feet are still on the blanket, but just the extra portion. And then take a moment to relax the heels down into the blanket. Relax the arms down. We'll go back into our chair pose, but with our heels on the blanket. So start to reach the hips back as you sweep the arms forward. And then slowly lift back up and lift the heels. Maybe they don't lift very much because they're already elevated. That's fine. Take a couple of pulses like this. And if it feels good, and that's a big if, it's not going to be for everyone, give yourself permission to lower the hips any amount here. With the heels up, you might notice that you have more space to lower the hips further than you normally would in chair, but of course only if that feels interesting and useful to you. And the next time the hips are down, we'll start to shift the weight over into the left foot and press up into our single leg Tadasana. Take a couple of breaths here. Notice if the ankle feels stable. It's going to be harder than in the first try we had. And then slowly start to step the right foot back, keeping the hips square, setting up for Virabhadrasana 1. So the back foot is mostly forward and then just slightly turned out. If you don't feel comfortable having the front leg up on the blanket like this, just take a little hop back and do Virabhadrasana 1 with both feet down. So take a moment to press the ball of the left foot down so there's really that stability in the squishy part of the front foot. And then slowly start to sweep the arms up. Take a couple of breaths here. And then shift the weight forward, returning to the single leg Tadasana. And then lower the foot down into chair, preparing for the second side. And again, you might find that you can go deeper into your chair with the elevated heels, but of course never push anything beyond what feels comfortable. Shift the weight over into the right foot, hover the left knee. Take a moment. There might be more wobbles because the heel is elevated, so just let your body figure that out as long as there's no pain. And then bend the right knee a little bit, making sure nothing's locking up. Glide the left foot back, toes stay mostly forward. Take a moment to establish the right foot, so letting the ball of the right foot spread out, anchor down into the heel, so the soleus is actually lengthening to push down there, and then sweep the arms up for Virabhadrasana 1 on the other side. Take a couple of breaths here. Relax through the shoulders. And see if you even want to lift the right heel even more. So you can play with almost like you have a nervous fidget and the heel's like tapping on the ground as you're seated. You can lift and lower the heel, just playing with that little bouncing sensation. And then start to shift the weight forward, lift the back knee, hover for 1 moment in your single leg Tadasana. And then step off of the blanket and let the feet be even and natural on the floor. Close the eyes and just absorb without thinking, without judging. Just let yourself be curious about the sensations in the feet and the calves and anywhere else you feel something. And then come on to the tippy toes and just be there and notice if you feel a little more stable or established. Maybe you can spread the toes out a little bit more. Maybe it's comfortable to allow the heels to lift higher, or there's more stability in the ankle. Playfully start to walk backwards. Be careful because you have that rolled up blanket behind you. You've got an obstacle. We're going to step over the blanket back onto our yoga mat. Lower the heels one more time. Sweep the arms forward, returning into chair pose with the whole foot on the ground. Hopefully it feels extra supportive and spacious and squishy. And then drape the body over the thighs. Let the spine be nice and long. Bend the knees deeply. Lengthen through the back of the neck. If it's comfortable, bring the hands to the earth so that you can lower one knee at a time. Tuck the toes underneath and pause for a moment in table. And then press the hips back. Actually flatten the toes. We've done enough with the feet. Flatten the tops of the feet. Let the hips come back. Melt the forehead. Because you've got that blanket right there, if it would be a fun experiment, you can bring the forehead onto the blanket just to make this a little gentler. You can even hug the blanket a little bit with the arms so the shoulders can relax. And gently push the tops of the feet down into the mat so that the hips get a little lighter, and you just get to do a little counter work for all of the heel lifting we've been doing, just getting the dorsiflexors of the feet online and supporting so the back of the leg can soften. And then place the hands underneath the shoulders and gently and slowly press up so you're seated on your heels. Sink your hips over to one side and kick your legs out towards me, turning to face the screen. You can go not to the next track, but 2 tracks from now, which is our cool down track. Again, feel free to have a sip of water. And look at your feet, and we're cooling down, right? So we don't want to do a lot. We don't want to push anything. Let your feet ever so gently, like maybe only half as far as you can, point forward, and then flex. And just imagine the legs almost like pumps. They're starting to squeeze out any stagnation, letting the work, all the work that you did with the feet, letting it travel up through the legs and eventually completely out of the body. And then explore dragging the heels wide and then closing them again. And then do this a couple times until you find a place that feels comfortable, and again, not necessarily your end range. And a way to check that is to make sure you can softly move from one side to the other, right? If you go too far, there's going to be a rigidity. Try bending one knee and gently melting over that side, and then kicking into that heel to gently roll up. And take a few of those pulses from side to side. And as you explore, there might be a craving for the heels to drag wider, which is fine if it's bubbling up from the inside rather than from a want of like, oh, I want to go further. And then as you explore this movement, if your body ever wants to pause and breathe, please give yourself that option. If you do that, I recommend gently letting the heel rock in and out. The fascia of the back line wraps over the heel, so that gentle rocking can help release the gastrocs and the hamstrings, the erectors, all the way up to the craniofascia. And if you're doing that, I should have just told you to do it, but it feels really good. Make sure to do it on the other side too. And of course, let the knee bend and let there be a softness. You don't want to feel any pulling anywhere. So if you feel pulling in the low back or pulling in the hamstrings, see if you can come out of it and instead feel more ease and sweetness. And then gently come back up to seated. Bring the soles of the feet together, just like letting your feet be friends with one another. Just pause here for a moment and wrap your hands around your feet and take a moment to just appreciate these amazing entities that support us all day long. You can give them a little massage, give them a little love. And then press them together and notice any sense of awakening that happens through the inner thighs and the core, and use that awakening to sit back up to neutral. Okay, there's going to be a little bit of setup for this next thing, but I promise it's worth it. We'll keep the music on until we're entering the restorative pose. So we're going to create a little podium for our legs. So I'm going to be using 2 blocks and my 2 blankets. If you don't have the exact same prop situation as I have, you can be creative. It doesn't matter how wide it is as long as both of your legs can rest on it. But I do like the height of having maybe almost like a foot. I'm going to show you what it looks like just so you can prepare. So it's a very gentle yet awesome inversion. The cherry on top is grabbing a strap and having it be looped. Feed it through, or feed the top blanket through the strap, and this is what's going to hold your legs together so that the adductors and the deep core can really relax here, and you don't have to worry about your legs falling off of your podium. And at some point before you recline, pause your music. Depending on where you are, you might need to grab a blanket for your body, or a hoodie, or socks, or dim the lights, or do all those things. And you're worth it, so take your time, even if you're like, oh, I really don't want to get up. It's so worth it. We're doing this, and then we're doing shavasana, and then we're meditating. So do all the fun little things. I promise it's worth it. And I feel compelled to do a little shiatsu on my legs. So if that's inviting to you, I invite you to do that. It's really a great combo with all the work that we've done. And then eventually, when your podium is all ready for your legs, just make sure that the strap is tight enough that your legs can relax completely and they won't fall off the edges of your stack of stuff. And once you've done that, let yourself gently recline. And just make sure the calves feel supported and the angle with the knees and the pelvis is comfortable. So you might need to wiggle closer or further away from the props so that the thigh bones aren't putting too much pressure in the hip sockets. And I notice that there's a tendency for the legs to not completely relax unless I tell them to. And so start to push the outer calves into the strap. And that's going to let the inner thighs relax and the inner calves relax. And then gently start to release that pushing into the strap. And see if the legs can fully relax. They might externally rotate gently, and that's just fine as long as it feels good to you. And as you come to stillness, just notice the joints of the body, and if there's any discomfort in the arms or shoulders or neck, take the time to wiggle around and make little adjustments so that you feel very supported. And we'll rest here for a few more minutes, and then we actually will additionally do Shavasana. So I'm just emotionally preparing you that you'll have to move from this position. And so see if you can completely release the grip without losing consciousness. And it's great to relax very deeply and see if you can stay connected to the heart. As we relax here, notice any sense of sweetness that starts to bubble up from the heart. Any sense of joy or clarity as the superficial layers of ourselves peel away. We can experience what lies in the deepest part of ourselves. Take a moment to just be. And then if the body's craving anything, you're more than welcome to explore that. And we'll just slowly make our way out of the strap. It might be easiest to hug the knees in and roll to one side. And then without any sense of rushing, and really allowing yourself to be present, eventually make your way to seated. We have a little bit of preparation now for our final shavasana. Because you have a strap, if this doesn't gross you out, this strap can be a nice eye covering for shavasana, so feel free to use that. And then please do whatever is most comfortable for you in shavasana. Some of my favorite supports are a blanket underneath the knees. And recently I've been noticing that my heels really love a little bit of padding. So if you do have that blanket underneath you, you can roll it up a little extra so that you've got some cushion for your heels. And then if my math is serving me, you have one more blanket left, which can be really nice opened, so it's nice and long, and then across the belly as kind of like a swaddle, and then the hands up on the blanket so that the elbows have a soft bend so that the arms aren't hyperextending. But if there's something else that you like to do more, please do what is comfortable for you. And take your time. And then let yourself relax. And I find I have resistance of coming out of the first restorative pose, but then going into shavasana, it's almost like I'm able to sink even deeper after that ascension. And again, all the work is over, so you can release completely. But see if you can stay tuned in to the heart center, so that you're conscious enough to marinate in what is revealed through your practice. And so we'll rest here for at least 10 more minutes, maybe a little bit longer. Notice your state of being. And see if you can stay tethered to that deepest part of yourself that you've revealed through your practice. You can gently allow the breath to travel to the heart center. Let the mouth gently smile. And take your time making sure that pathway is clear. And then eventually layer in gentle movements, letting the heart be the focus and everything else just secondary. Make any gentle movements. Let yourself enjoy the pathway up to seated, any stops along the way. We just have a few minutes for meditation, and there's no need to rush. Just eventually find your way into a meditation seat that's supportive and comfortable. And this class ended up being extra restorative and nourishing. And so notice your ability to feel self-love and compassion in this moment. Try to find that same energy even in your meditation seat. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let it be soft and sweet. And let your focus stay at the heart space. And I've really been enjoying focusing on the very center of my heart as I inhale. And then exhaling to keep that connection as I feel myself as spacious as possible. And if you'd like to attach one of the lineage mantras to your breath, you're welcome to do that. In this last moment of class, I invite you to notice any sense of freedom, spaciousness you've revealed through your practice. And take a few breaths to stay connected to that truest part of yourself. And see if you can maintain awareness there as you continue with your day. And thank you so much for practicing. Namaste.